When 72-year-old Arthur McKenzie stumbled upon an OnlyFans ad while trying to figure out how to download a weather app, his quiet retirement took an unexpected turn. What started as innocent curiosity spiraled into a full-blown obsession with a young, charming creator named Sapphire Dawn. Within months, Arthur had drained his entire pension, leaving his family baffled and furious. But what came next? A twist involving secrets, revelations, and a jaw-dropping redemption left everyone utterly stunned. Arthur McKenzie had always been a man of routine. At 72, his days unfolded with clockwork precision: an early morning walk to fetch the paper, feeding the pigeons at the park, and evenings spent watching reruns of Murder, She Wrote. Life, for Arthur, was predictable, a blend of contentment and a lingering loneliness following the death of his wife, Margaret. Yet even he couldn't have foreseen how a single click would unravel everything. It all began one quiet Tuesday evening. Arthur had just finished his dinner, a modest meal of baked beans on toast, and decided to tackle the puzzle of modern technology: his new smartphone. A gift from his daughter, Grace, the phone was meant to keep him connected to the world, though Arthur often felt more disconnected than ever. His old flip phone had done the job just fine, but Grace insisted he get with the times. Arthur squinted at the icons on the touchscreen, trying to download a weather app. As he fumbled through the unfamiliar interface, an ad popped up: "Discover authentic connections on OnlyFans." The bright colors and bold text were hard to ignore, but it was the image of a young woman with emerald green eyes and an inviting smile that caught his attention. Curiosity, they say, killed the cat. In Arthur's case, it merely opened a Pandora's box. He clicked the ad, expecting a scam or overpriced vitamins. Instead, he found himself scrolling through profiles of creators. One name stood out: Sapphire Dawn. Her auburn hair and warm smile captivated him. Against his better judgment, Arthur clicked on her profile. Her bio read, "Here to brighten your day. Let's share stories, laughs, and a bit of magic." Arthur hesitated. Wasn't this for younger folks? Yet there was something disarming about Sapphire Dawn. She didn't seem flashy or shallow like the influencers Grace often complained about. Against his better judgment, he subscribed. The fee was only $5, hardly a sum to fret over. "It's like tipping a street performer," he muttered to himself, ignoring the pang of guilt. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly Sapphire Dawn's content would become a staple in his life. Her videos were unlike anything Arthur had seen. Some were light-hearted chats, others were guided meditations or poetry readings. She had a knack for making her audience feel seen, even in a virtual space. But what truly captivated Arthur were her live streams. She addressed viewers by name, answered their questions, and even remembered little details from previous chats. When she greeted him with, "Hello, Mr. McKenzie. How's the weather in your town today?" he felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. Weeks turned into months, and Arthur eagerly awaited Sapphire Dawn's uploads. His routines began to shift. Morning walks were postponed, crossword puzzles abandoned, and even his favorite TV shows went unwatched. Yet, Arthur told himself this wasn't an obsession. It was connection. Wasn't this what Grace had wanted? The tipping began innocently. During a live stream, Sapphire Dawn mentioned saving for a new camera. Without thinking, Arthur tipped $20. The thrill of seeing her light up with gratitude was intoxicating. "Thank you so much, Mr. McKenzie," she exclaimed. "You're the sweetest." For the first time in years, Arthur felt noticed, appreciated, even needed. But the tips grew more frequent and generous. Arthur justified each one. "She's working hard," he reasoned. "It's not easy for young people these days." When Sapphire Dawn confided in her fans about struggling to pay her rent, Arthur didn't hesitate to send $500. "It's what Margaret would have wanted," he whispered, picturing his late wife's compassionate smile. What Arthur didn't realize was how quickly these seemingly harmless decisions were adding up. By the third month, he had spent over $3,000, a significant chunk of his pension. Yet he couldn't stop. Each tip brought a fleeting moment of joy, a sense of purpose that had been absent from his life for years. The turning point came on a dreary Thursday. Arthur reviewed his bank statement, a habit developed after years of budgeting. His heart sank as he scrolled through the transactions. Line after line of payments to OnlyFans stared back at him, totaling over $15,000. Panic set in. How had it spiraled so far? The worst realization hit him as he sat in his modest kitchen, staring at the dwindling numbers in his account. His pension, the safety net he had spent years building, was gone. The rent on his small apartment was due in 2 weeks, and there wasn't enough left to cover it. The weight of his decisions bore down on him, filling the room with a deafening silence. Yet even in his despair, Arthur clung to a fragile thread of hope. Sapphire Dawn, or rather the connection he had formed with her, had given him something he hadn't felt in years. Was it real, or had he simply been fooling himself? These questions haunted him as he sat alone, watching the shadows lengthen on the walls of his kitchen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Arthur made a decision that would change the course of his life. He needed answers, and the only way to get them was to meet Sapphire Dawn in person. Whether it was a mistake or a shot at redemption, Arthur didn't know, but he was about to find out. Arthur McKenzie's journey to uncover the truth behind Sapphire Dawn began with a train ticket. His modest savings were dwindling, yet he spent the last $62 in his account on a one-way trip to the city where Sapphire Dawn's OnlyFans profile indicated she lived. It was a gamble, but Arthur had decided he needed to see her in person to understand if the connection they'd shared was genuine or just a cleverly constructed illusion. The train ride was long and reflective. As the countryside zipped past the window, Arthur couldn't help but question his choices. Had he been foolish to spend his pension this way? Grace's voice echoed in his mind, chastising him for his reckless behavior. He had no answers, only a gnawing curiosity that pushed him forward. For the first time in months, Arthur felt a sense of purpose, however misguided it may have been. When he arrived at the bustling city station late in the afternoon, the noise and chaos overwhelmed him. For someone accustomed to the quiet hum of his suburban life, the crowded streets and blaring horns were almost too much to handle. Arthur clutched the slip of paper on which he'd written the address he found buried in one of Sapphire Dawn's posts. It was a modest neighborhood, a stark contrast to the glamorous lifestyle he had imagined for her. The building was a nondescript apartment complex with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read, Golden Pines Apartments. Arthur stood outside for several minutes, his heart pounding in his chest. What if she wasn't home? Worse, what if she was and didn't want to see him? He considered turning back, but the weight of his empty bank account and his desperate need for answers urged him forward. He knocked on the door, his hand trembling slightly. The door creaked open, and there she was. A young woman in her mid-20s with auburn hair pulled back into a messy bun, wearing a faded sweatshirt that read, Community College Class of 2022. Her emerald green eyes, however, were unmistakable. Mr. McKenzie, she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and apprehension. Arthur nodded, unsure of what to say. I just wanted to meet you, he stammered, to see if you're real. Sapphire Dawn, whose real name was Sarah Daniels, invited him inside. The apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture and a faint scent of lavender. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, and a young boy, no older than 3, peeked out from behind the couch. This is my son, Jamie, Sarah explained, picking him up and balancing him on her hip. I suppose I owe you an explanation. Over a cup of tea, Sarah recounted her story. She had started her OnlyFans account during the pandemic after losing her job as a preschool teacher. It was never about exploitation or deceit, she assured Arthur. I created Sapphire Dawn because I needed to pay the bills and keep a roof over Jamie's head. People like you, kind, supportive, made that possible." Arthur listened intently, his emotions swirling. On one hand, he felt betrayed. The glamorous persona of Sapphire Dawn was a far cry from the struggling single mother sitting before him. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the sincerity in Sarah's voice or the challenges she had faced. In her words, he heard echoes of his own struggles after Margaret's passing. "I never meant to hurt anyone," Sarah said, her eyes glistening with tears. "I know what I do isn't conventional, but it's honest work. I didn't expect someone like you to care so much." Arthur was silent for a long moment, staring into his cup of tea. Finally, he said, "It wasn't just about the content. It was about feeling connected again. You reminded me of someone I lost a long time ago." Sarah smiled softly. "Your wife?" He nodded, his throat tight. "Margaret, she had the same spark in her eyes, the same way of making people feel seen." Their conversation stretched into the evening. Arthur shared stories about Margaret, his daughter Grace, and the loneliness that had crept into his life over the years. Sarah, in turn, opened up about her struggles as a single mother, her dreams of going back to school, and the guilt she carried for the persona she had created. For the first time, both of them felt truly understood. Jamie toddled over at one point, handing Arthur a small toy car. The gesture, simple as it was, melted something in Arthur's heart. He realized that he wasn't just looking at a young woman trying to make ends meet. He was looking at a family, one that reminded him of everything he had once cherished. By the time Arthur left, he felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, understanding, and a newfound sense of purpose. He had come seeking answers, and while he hadn't found the glamorous Sapphire Dawn he'd imagined, he had found something far more real: a young woman doing her best to survive, and in her, a reflection of his own vulnerabilities. As he stepped back onto the streets, Arthur realized he couldn't simply walk away. He had been given a second chance, not just to help Sarah, but to find meaning in his own life again. A plan began to form in his mind, one that would take both of them by surprise. For the first time in years, Arthur felt that his mistakes could lead to something greater, something worth fighting for. Arthur couldn't sleep that night. After returning to his budget motel, he lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of his meeting with Sarah. He had set out to find Sapphire Dawn, the radiant muse who had brought light to his dreary days, only to discover Sarah Daniels, a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was real in ways he hadn't anticipated, and that reality weighed heavily on him. Morning arrived, and with it, a renewed sense of determination. Arthur's life had been filled with regrets. Times he had chosen inaction over action. But not this time. He scribbled notes in his pocket journal, slipped on his scuffed shoes, and ventured out into the crisp city air. His first stop was the local library. The librarian, a young man with curly hair, raised an eyebrow when Arthur asked for books on social media monetization. "It's for my granddaughter," Arthur lied, although the librarian didn't seem convinced. Armed with books and printouts, Arthur spent the morning immersed in hashtags, metrics, and strategies. By lunchtime, Arthur had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. He folded his notes, tucked them into his coat pocket, and headed back to Sarah's apartment. When she opened the door, her expression was a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Mr. McKenzie? I wasn't expecting you back so soon." Arthur smiled. "I have an idea, and I'd like to talk to you about it. May I come in?" Sarah hesitated, but eventually nodded, stepping aside. Jamie was sprawled on the carpet, building a tower of colorful blocks. Arthur couldn't help but smile as the boy gave him a toothy grin. Over cups of coffee, Arthur laid out his plan. "I've been thinking about how I could help you," he began, "and I think we can turn this into something bigger, something meaningful." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" Let's combine your talent for creating content with my perspective on life, Arthur said. What if we created a platform together? Something that blends entertainment with real-life lessons. You can still use Sapphire Dawn, but we can shift the focus. Make it about connection and community. Sarah stared at him. Mr. McKenzie, I don't think people want life lessons from me. They come to me for other things. Arthur waved a hand. That's where you're wrong. People crave authenticity. They want to feel part of something. You've already built a following. Let's give them something new, something that matters. For the next hour, they brainstormed. Arthur's journal filled with ideas. Live streams featuring heartfelt conversations, videos about resilience, and segments answering audience questions. By the time they finished, Sarah looked overwhelmed but intrigued. This could actually work, she said cautiously, but it's going to take a lot of effort. Arthur grinned. Good thing I've got nothing but time. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Arthur stayed in the city, renting a room nearby. Each morning, he arrived at Sarah's apartment with new ideas. They turned her living room into a makeshift studio, complete with borrowed lamps and a backdrop Sarah painted herself. Jamie often wandered into recordings, delighting their growing audience. Their first video was an introduction. Sarah, as Sapphire Dawn, explained her journey and her vision. Arthur, in a sweater vest, shared his experiences with loss, loneliness, and unexpected connections. The response was overwhelming. Comments poured in, many from viewers who saw themselves in Arthur's story or found inspiration in Sarah's resilience. As their channel grew, so did their bond. Sarah began to see Arthur not just as a benefactor but as a partner and friend. And Arthur, for the first time in years, felt truly alive. He discovered a new purpose, one that gave his days meaning and his nights peace. But not everyone was thrilled. Grace, Arthur's daughter, caught wind of his endeavor through a neighbor who stumbled across one of their videos. Furious, she called him late one night. "Dad, what are you doing? You're making a fool of yourself," she snapped. "And with some random woman from the internet? This isn't you." Arthur took a deep breath. "Grace, I know this seems strange, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Please try to understand." Grace was silent before muttering, "I hope you know what you're doing." Despite her disapproval, Arthur pressed on. Their channel, now called Sapphire and Sage, became a beacon for viewers seeking solace and inspiration. They shared stories of triumph and failure, laughter and tears. As their audience grew, so did their impact. They used their earnings to support local charities, including a food bank that had once helped Sarah. One day, as Arthur watched Jamie toddle around the studio, he realized something profound. In helping Sarah rebuild her life, he had rebuilt his own. The connections they had forged, their community, their partnership, and their shared mission had given him a second chance at happiness. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the room, Arthur smiled. His journey had been unexpected, filled with mistakes and missteps. But it had led him here, to this moment, and for that, he was endlessly grateful. As the weeks rolled on, Sapphire and Sage became more than just a channel. It became a movement. What started as a humble collaboration between Sarah and Arthur grew into a community of thousands who tuned in weekly for their heartfelt conversations and lessons in resilience. The blend of Sarah's youthful energy and Arthur's seasoned wisdom struck a chord with viewers of all ages. But with growth came challenges. Sarah found herself struggling to juggle motherhood, content creation, and the flood of messages from fans. Arthur, too, was beginning to feel the strain. Though his enthusiasm was unwavering, the long hours in front of a camera and the mental effort required to engage with their audience took its toll. They needed help. "Arthur, we can't keep doing this alone," Sarah said one afternoon as they filmed in her cramped living room. Jamie was napping, and the normally cheerful Sarah looked visibly exhausted. Arthur nodded. We need someone to manage the technical side of things, editing, posting, scheduling. That way, we can focus on what we do best. The next day, Sarah posted an announcement. They were looking for a tech-savvy team member to join Sapphire and Sage. The response was overwhelming. After hours of deliberation, they settled on a young woman named Mia, a 22-year-old digital marketing graduate with a passion for storytelling. Mia quickly became an integral part of their team. With her help, their content became more polished, their schedule consistent, and their audience engagement more meaningful. She also brought fresh ideas to the table, like launching a podcast and hosting live events where fans could meet Sarah and Arthur. One of Mia's first big ideas was a charity live stream. Let's do a 12-hour live stream to raise money for a cause that resonates with our audience, she proposed. Sarah's eyes lit up. We could donate to the food bank that helped me when I first became a single mom. Arthur agreed. And we can share stories from people in the community, show them how their contributions make a difference. The charity live stream, titled Resilience in Action, was a massive undertaking. Mia worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with guest speakers and ensuring the technical aspects ran smoothly. Sarah and Arthur prepared for weeks, crafting stories and planning discussions. The day of the live stream arrived, and both Sarah and Arthur were nervous. But as the countdown clock reached 0, their nerves gave way to excitement. Viewers flooded the chat with support, donations poured in, and guest speakers shared powerful stories. By the end of the 12-hour event, they had raised over $50,000 for the local food bank. Sarah was in tears as she thanked their audience. "You've changed so many lives today," she said, her voice trembling. Arthur placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his own eyes misty. The success of the live stream brought newfound confidence to the team. It also attracted media attention, with several news outlets reaching out for interviews. For Sarah, the spotlight was both exhilarating and intimidating. "I never imagined my life would look like this," she admitted to Arthur during one of their quieter moments. "It feels surreal." Arthur chuckled. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. But not all surprises were pleasant. As their fame grew, so did the scrutiny. A tabloid article titled "The Truth About Sapphire Dawn" began circulating online, painting Sarah as a manipulative opportunist who had exploited Arthur's kindness. The story included screenshots of old OnlyFans content and hinted at Arthur's financial struggles as evidence of her supposed deception. The article hit Sarah hard. She locked herself in her apartment, refusing to answer calls. Arthur, however, was determined to stand by her side. "You've faced worse than this, Sarah," he told her through the door. "Don't let them take away everything we've built." It took days of coaxing, but Sarah finally agreed to address the controversy. Together, they filmed a video titled "The Truth About Sapphire and Sage," where they candidly discussed Sarah's past and their mission. "We've never claimed to be perfect," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears. "But we're trying to create something good, something that helps people." The video went viral, silencing critics and rallying their supporters. Messages of encouragement poured in, and their subscriber count skyrocketed. For Sarah, the experience was a painful reminder of how quickly public opinion could turn, but it also reinforced the importance of staying true to herself. For Arthur, the ordeal highlighted the strength of their partnership. "We're stronger than we think," he told Sarah one evening as they sat on her couch, Jamie asleep in the next room. "And as long as we stick together, we can handle anything." As the months passed, Sapphire and Sage continued to grow, evolving into a platform that was more than either Sarah or Arthur had envisioned. They weren't just creators, they were change-makers, using their stories to inspire others and their platform to make a tangible impact. And though challenges still lay ahead, Arthur found comfort in knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. For the first time in a long time, his life felt full of purpose, connection, and hope. Months passed, and Sapphire and Sage grew into a global phenomenon. Their subscriber count crossed the 1 million mark, something neither Sarah nor Arthur could have imagined in her cramped living room. Their content expanded: podcasts, live streams, collaborations with creators, and short films spreading messages of resilience and hope. With success came opportunities. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements, brand partnerships, and nonprofit collaborations. Sarah and Arthur were flown to conferences, featured in documentaries, and invited to share their journey on large platforms. For Sarah, the attention was exhilarating but exhausting. For Arthur, it was thrilling and bewildering. One particularly memorable invitation came from a foundation hosting a Voices of Change summit. They wanted Sarah and Arthur to deliver the keynote address. The theme was the power of stories, a subject tailor-made for Sapphire and Sage. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for this," Arthur confessed to Sarah as they rehearsed. "Public speaking isn't my strong suit." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "Arthur, you've been speaking your truth every day on camera. This is no different." The summit, held in a grand hall, was packed. Sarah began by sharing her struggles as a single mom and her journey to create Sapphire Dawn. Then it was Arthur's turn. "I've lived a long life," he began, his voice steady, "and I've made mistakes. But it's never too late to start again, to find connection and hope. That's what this journey has taught me." The room was silent as Arthur spoke, his words resonating deeply. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the hall. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, and for Arthur, it was unforgettable. The moment became one of those rare occasions where all the years of struggle felt worthwhile. But as Sapphire and Sage reached new heights, the pressures took a toll. Sarah was stretched thin, juggling motherhood, content creation, and public appearances. Arthur, too, felt the weight. Their brainstorming sessions became rare, replaced with packed schedules. The strain began to show. One afternoon, during a tense planning session, Sarah snapped. "You don't understand how much I have on my plate," she exclaimed, her voice sharp and uncharacteristically frustrated. Arthur, taken aback, responded calmly, "I know you're overwhelmed, Sarah, but you don't have to carry this alone. We're a team." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she slumped onto the couch. "I feel like I'm failing. Jamie, you, everyone." Arthur leaned forward, his voice gentle and full of empathy. "You're not failing anyone. You've built something incredible, but you need to take care of yourself, too." The conversation marked a turning point for them both. They scaled back their commitments, prioritizing quality over quantity. Mia suggested hiring additional team members to help manage their workload. With the new hires, Sarah and Arthur finally had time to focus on the aspects of Sapphire and Sage that brought them the most joy. As life began to stabilize, an unexpected opportunity arose. A major streaming platform reached out with a proposal. They wanted to create a documentary series about Sapphire and Sage. The series would chronicle their journey, highlighting the impact of their work and the lives they had touched. The idea was both exciting and daunting. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Sarah asked one evening as they reviewed the proposal. Arthur smiled. "We've faced bigger challenges. If our story can inspire more people, it's worth it." Filming the series was an emotional journey. The production team followed Sarah and Arthur for months, capturing everything from their daily routines to their most vulnerable moments. Fans shared stories of how Sapphire and Sage changed their lives. A widower rediscovering hope, an abuse survivor finding strength, and an artist inspired to pursue her dreams. The premiere of the series brought an overwhelming response. Messages poured in from viewers around the world, each one sharing a personal story of resilience, connection, or newfound hope. Sapphire and Sage had become more than a channel. It was a lifeline. One evening, after reading a particularly moving fan letter, Arthur and Sarah sat together in her living room. Jamie was asleep, and the room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" Sarah asked, her voice soft and filled with awe. Arthur chuckled. "If you'd told me a year ago I'd be doing all this, I'd have called you crazy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." Sarah smiled, a mix of exhaustion and contentment on her face. "Neither would I." As they sat together in companionable silence, both realized their journey wasn't just about building a successful channel. It was about the lives they had touched and the bond they had forged. In helping others, they had healed parts of themselves they hadn't even realized were broken. Though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: they were exactly where they were meant to be, and together they could face whatever came next. The morning of the Sapphire and Sage Foundation's official launch was quiet. Arthur stood by the window of his small hotel room, looking out over the city skyline. The day was finally here, the culmination of everything he and Sarah had built together. What had started as an unlikely partnership between a grieving widower and a single mother trying to make ends meet had grown into something far beyond their original vision. Downstairs, the event hall buzzed with activity. Volunteers adjusted decorations, technicians tested microphones, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. A large banner hung above the stage reading, "Sapphire and Sage Foundation, Building Resilience, Inspiring Hope." Sarah found Arthur near the refreshments table, nursing a cup of tea. "Nervous?" she asked with a smile. Arthur chuckled. "Always. But it's a good kind of nervous. How about you?" "A little," she admitted. "But mostly, I'm just grateful. I never thought my life would look like this." Arthur placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "None of this would have happened without you. You had the courage to start this journey, and look where it's brought us." The Foundation's launch event was not just a celebration but a promise to their audience and supporters. The Sapphire and Sage Foundation aimed to provide resources for mental health, support for single parents, and community-driven projects to foster resilience. It was an ambitious goal, but one that felt like the natural next step for everything they had created. The event began with a highlight reel showcasing their journey, clips from their early videos, snapshots of fan letters, and testimonials from people whose lives had been changed by Sapphire and Sage. The audience, a mix of supporters, collaborators, and beneficiaries, watched intently, many wiping away tears. Sarah took the stage first, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "When I started this journey, I was just trying to survive. I never imagined it would lead to something like this. But what I've learned is that resilience isn't just about getting through the hard times. It's about finding meaning in them. And that's what this foundation is about, helping others find their strength, their hope, their purpose." Arthur joined her on stage, the applause deafening as he approached the microphone. He adjusted his glasses, pausing for a moment to steady himself. "I've spent most of my life thinking about what I've lost," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "But this journey has taught me to think about what I've found. Connection, purpose, family. I'm standing here today because of those things, and because of all of you." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. As Arthur and Sarah stood together on stage, they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, a mix of pride, gratitude, and the unshakable bond they had formed. The rest of the event was filled with speeches, performances, and a panel discussion featuring guests who had been part of their journey. Mia, their ever-reliable team member, moderated the panel with her trademark enthusiasm, and Jamie, now 4 years old, made a surprise appearance to hand his mother a bouquet of flowers. The crowd melted at the sight, and Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. As the day wound down, Arthur found himself sitting alone in a quiet corner of the hall, watching the attendees mingle. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace, something he hadn't felt in years. Sarah joined him, handing him a glass of sparkling cider. "We did it," she said softly, sitting beside him. Arthur nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. We really did. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on everything they had achieved. The hardships, the doubts, the late nights, they had all been worth it. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, they both felt ready to face them together. As the last of the attendees trickled out, Sarah and Arthur walked to the stage one final time, standing under the banner that bore the name of their foundation. They looked out over the now empty hall, the echoes of the day's applause still lingering in their minds. "This is just the beginning," Sarah said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Arthur turned to her, his eyes sparkling with the same hope he'd felt the day they launched their first video. "It is," he agreed, "and I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else." As they turned off the stage lights and stepped into the cool evening air, Arthur realized something profound. The path that had once seemed so uncertain had led him to a place he never thought he'd find, a place of purpose, of connection, of family. And for the first time in a long time, he felt not just content, but truly, deeply happy. Their journey was far from over, but as they walked together into the night, Arthur knew one thing for certain. They were ready for whatever came next.